If you have fruit trees, chances are you might be wasting some of the most productive growing space in your yard. Most gardeners tend to focus on what they're growing, not the entire ecosystem around it. So today I want to talk about planting out our fruit tree guilds. I'm Brittany from Quarter Acre Roots, where we talk about growing a lot on a little bit of space. And today we're going to talk through 7 crops that you can plant underneath of your fruit trees to turn that unproductive space into something you can harvest and eat. In a small space, you definitely have to focus on maximizing space. So one of the ways I like to do that is stacking our layers of planting. So when you look at planting around a fruit tree, you've got that higher level of the fruit tree, but then you've got space all around it, underneath of it. And chances are you've probably already done a lot of work to improve that soil and you're tending to the area. So you should definitely be growing things in it too. A quick note, we're going to focus specifically on edible things to plant around your fruit trees. Obviously, like building out guilds, you want to have all sorts of different plants there. You want to have pollinator attractants, you want to have ground covers, you want to have all sorts of stuff. Today we're focusing on edible things that you can put under your trees. We're gonna head out to the back of the yard first to talk about our rhubarb, and it is a super beautiful but a little wet morning here. We just broke a very long dry spell with a lot of rain last night. It was pouring for a while, so everything got a really good soak. Everything is looking really nice and lush this morning back here. All right, so here's a look at where we've got our rhubarb. It is looking super duper lush. I'm probably gonna come in here and cut a little bit of it before I stop completely cutting for the season, because you do want to let your plants recharge. You don't want to keep it cut completely down to the ground every year. It's because rhubarb is a perennial vegetable that is going to produce harvest year after year. And if you're unfamiliar with rhubarb, it has these big, gorgeous leaves and a sprawling habit, but it's not actually the leaves that you eat, it's the stalks that are in here. So I'm not much of a baker, but I have been chopping up these stalks and putting them into muffin mixtures. I really like it. I love a tart flavor. My family isn't the biggest on it, so I have to kind of balance it out with something sweet in the recipe as well. But if you like tart and you like productive plants, definitely check out rhubarb. What makes rhubarb especially helpful and useful under fruit trees is that it's super early to sprout in the season. So it often is taking advantage of that light before your fruit trees completely leaf out and start to shade the area underneath of it. It gets plenty of sunlight during that early spring time frame. And then once the super strong summer heat arrives, it starts to get a little bit of shade in the afternoon, which can actually be really helpful. It's also just generally great for filling out space. So this is like all rhubarb here. It is a pretty huge plant. I originally had 3 of these bare root rhubarbs that I put back here and quickly realized, oh my God, this is taking up way too much space. I really only have room to dedicate to one rhubarb area. I may split this in the future and plant it somewhere else, maybe like under my plum tree once I'm building out that guild. But for the time being, we're just kind of letting it grow big and happy here. One of the things I talk about a lot is how planting things that sprawl out and cover the ground can help with conserving moisture in the soil. So it can be really great to plant things that have a nice sprawling habit around any sort of plant you really want to conserve moisture around, not just fruit trees. I like to cover the soil around my vegetables as well to help conserve that moisture. And the giant leaves on the rhubarb really go a long way in helping to shade out the soil to conserve that moisture and also to help block some of those annual weeds that would germinate more quickly if they had direct sunlight and bare soil. One rhubarb plant can produce a surprising amount of stuff to harvest, especially after you've had it for a couple years. So I would recommend starting with one and seeing how things go from there. You can always split it and you can always add more, but it's a plant that's probably going to get a little bit bigger than you might be anticipating, especially if you're really bad with like spatial planning in your head like I am. I really have to map out the measurements of things on the ground to actually understand how big they're going to be. It just never translates from my head to real life the way it should. All right, next up we have currants, and we have moved up to my front yard because I decided to plant the currants in my front yard for the same reason currants make a really great plant to put underneath the fruit trees. Unlike many berries that require full sun 100% and they need that full sun all day to produce berries and to truly thrive, currants are surprisingly tolerant of part sun conditions. And considering they're from like cooler weather areas of the world, that makes a lot of sense. They can really thrive in my hotter climate here in Maryland Zone 7 if I have them in an area that gets morning sun like here in our front yard, and then as the day goes on, they get a little bit more shaded. This can help to protect them from the super harsh afternoon sun. And the currants that I didn't have planted under trees, we had a really long, super hot spell a couple weeks ago that was just absolutely unbearable. We weren't getting any rain. It was like over 100 degrees multiple days in a row, and a lot of my currants did suffer. I probably should have added a shade cloth, but I'm generally of the mindset that I want things to function on their own in my garden unless I absolutely have to do something to save them. And none of the currants died, but the ones that had some shade, either from being under a tree like our hardy almond tree right here, or that were a little bit more shaded, those are the ones that showed the least amount of damage after that heat spell. And even though the bushes stay relatively compact and you can prune them to stay even more compact, they're highly productive bushes, and they can produce many pounds of fruit each year once they're established. So they're really productive for the amount of space that they take up. We decided to add in a black currant and a red currant into our Master Gardener demonstration garden this year under some of our fruit trees in the guilds, and they are absolutely thriving. And then in my yard, I have up here in the front yard 2 black currants, 2 red currants, a pink currant, and a white currant. The only ones that are mature enough to get berries from so far are the black currants, and they were delicious this year. We got a bunch of them. One thing to note is that there are some restrictions on where you can plant currants in the United States because of their ability to carry and transmit white pine bluster disease. So always check with your local agricultural extension to make sure the currants, the varieties of currants that you're growing, and currants in the genus in general are something that you can plant in your area. If you order them online, it'll also usually tell you too, like, we can't ship to you here. There are regulations you need to follow, or you may need to get like a permit before getting a currant or something like that. But here in Maryland, it's not an issue. All right, next up, we've got ground cherries. So this is actually my first year growing ground cherries from seed. This is my ground cherry plant here. And I do have it in a raised bed because honestly, even though I read the directions and I read how big it was supposed to get, I was truly not expecting it to be as sprawling of a plant as it is. So I've got this A-frame trellis in here to kind of help keep it like up off a little bit, but my guess is that it's gonna get really sprawling as we get into August here. So ground cherries are not actually cherries at all. They are relatives of the tomatillo. So they also have that papery husk. I'm gonna take one off to show you guys that's not ripe because I don't think I've had any that have fallen here yet. So like a tomatillo, they have this papery husk, and then there's a little berry inside. I will open it up to show you guys. So right now it is green, but eventually this berry turns into like a golden yellowish color. And I love ground cherries. A lot of times you will see them in stores labeled as like generic golden berries, and they don't have the husks around them. It's just the golden berry, the yellow berry. I saw them in our Wegmans recently, and I've seen them actually quite often in our Wegmans labeled as golden berries. I think I might have seen them as like sunberries another time, but this one is going to really like full sun. It's not going to be as productive in a part shade environment, but it is still going to produce because it's a very prolific and very drought tolerant plant. So put it on the edge of where your fruit tree circle is, maybe in an area that gets afternoon sun, like maybe on the south or west edge of a plant. You would want to put it mosquito. Something like a currant, you would want to put it in an area that gets morning sun, and then on the other side of that tree, you would put something like a ground cherry. Since it spreads so widely and it doesn't get super tall, it kind of like spreads out along the ground. It's also going to make a really great soil cover like the rhubarb did. So it's going to help to shade out that soil to conserve moisture, to protect those fruit tree roots, and it's also going to help suppress those weeds. Big caveat with your ground cherries though. Ground cherries, a lot like tomatoes, they are going to reseed themselves everywhere. So once you get a ground cherry plant, you're probably going to get volunteers next year. This one was actually kind of a pain to start. It took forever to start. Only about half of my seeds germinated, and it is an heirloom seed, meaning that seeds saved from the fruits it produces are going to be true to the type that it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to let it reseed and then carefully dig it up and move it under one of my fruit trees next year. Now let's talk about elderberry. So elderberry is a really great shrub that you can prune into more of a tree form, or you can let it go crazy as a shrub. It's a native plant here where I'm at on the east coast of the United States. So it's a highly valued plant for wildlife as well. You don't want to eat the berries of elderberry raw, but you can use them to make things like syrups, pies, etc., etc. I actually don't grow elderberry for the berries necessarily. I grow elderberry because it's a beautiful native shrub, and it grows in the wild on kind of like woodland edges where it's partially shaded. So I know it's going to be a good plant that I can put in a shadier area. The area we're in now is going to be our eventual native shade garden around our wildlife pond, which is behind me. This is all stuff we put in this year, so it's not terribly mature yet, and it is the only shade we really have in the yard. And this is the first year where the redbud tree, which is over there, and a weed tree behind me have provided significant shade for this area. I've got the elderberry here because I want it to be kind of draping around the pond, but next to me right here is a pawpaw. So once this pawpaw gets bigger, what I will probably end up doing is keeping the elderberry pruned down to kind of like a bonsai type form so that it's not out competing the pawpaw, because I don't want the pawpaw to get too big either. either, because we want to keep our trees relatively small and reachable so that things aren't going to waste. But eventually what I will have here is the pawpaw as the center plant, and then a bunch of things around it filling out that bottom layer, including this elderberry. So even though the elderberry is bigger than the pawpaw right now, it's not always gonna be like that. It's just a super fast grower. Now I gotta say, I am loving with all this rain, these new boots that I got. I do not get sent that much stuff. Like, I am not someone with a huge following that people are always trying to send stuff to. So the fact that someone wanted to send me boots, like, absolutely made my day, especially because I really did need new boots. My old duck boots that I would use in and around the garden were separating at the front of them, and I had tried gluing them back together last year to get another year out of them. I've had them for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. So the brand Hysea asked to send me these boots. They are completely waterproof. They are easy to pull on and off. And I love the fact that they have this non-skid bottom on them. And they're great for just general work chores. But our Master Gardener demonstration garden has like highly sloped areas in the garden. And it has areas that can be like kind of treacherous to work in. I broke these in at a work session at our demonstration garden a couple weeks ago to try them out. Before I shared anything about them, I wanted to make sure that I really liked them, and they were awesome. I got a couple compliments on them too. I guess I'm just used to wearing like super old boots that are falling apart. So thank you to Hysea for sending me these boots. I love them so much, and I find them to be a super helpful addition to my daily gardening chores and my daily gardening routine. Here's a close-up look. I got the purple bottoms. Aren't they so cute? Okay, it is so wet and it is getting so hot and humid out there. I needed to take a break in the shade. So I'm gonna start talking about this next one and then show you guys where I have it in the yard. The next one is strawberries, a favorite to act as a living mulch under trees and pretty much like any bare spot in your garden. One of the reasons strawberries make such a great companion plant for going under fruit trees and other things is because they have a very shallow root system. So your roots aren't going to be competing with any other root systems that you have nearby. Because you gotta think about that too when you're figuring out like what you're gonna plant around and under things, like how the root systems will work with one another or work against one another. It's true that strawberries do prefer full sun, but again, if you have them on the edges of that canopy, and especially if you have like a June bearing strawberry where they're going to produce those strawberries earlier in the season before you get tons and tons of new growth on your fruit trees, they're going to produce a steady crop. And even if you don't get the amount of berries that you would get if they were in full sun, you're making use of a space that you would not be planting in otherwise, so I still think it's worth the trade-off. And they are a fantastic living mulch because strawberries, as you may be familiar with, spread via runners. So they are going to fill out a space and propagate themselves really well without you doing much at all. In fact, you're probably gonna have to go in and thin out that strawberry patch every year or so to take out your older plants, give the patch some breathing room. Let's head back out into the sun and I'll show you guys where I have strawberries everywhere in the garden right now. So up here by the patio, I have strawberries to fill out this whole area around my gumi shrubs. So right now, this area is kind of like new this year because we removed some invasive grasses that we had in here, and I replaced the 2 large miscanthus grasses with these 2 gumi berry shrubs here. So these are not producing yet, and these will get quite large. So what I would like to do long term in this area is let strawberries just kind of like fill this out with some perennial herbs and some other things that I add into this area. I will eventually remove this coneflower here. I just put that here this year because the area looked really empty. And then back here along this trellis, we have a boysenberry shrub, which is a shrub that fruits on the second year canes. So you have to let those canes trellis up something and then keep them over the winter, and then they'll produce next year. I just love having strawberries all over the yard because look, we're filming right now and we're not supposed to be getting strawberries from these, but there is a beautiful little strawberry. Looks like he could use a little bit more time, so I'm gonna leave him here to ripen a little bit more. But look, it's just a beautiful ground cover, lush and green, and you get some berries out of it too. I've also found strawberries to be a really productive choice under our peach tree. So one of my goals for this year was to build out 2 of my fruit tree guilds. So the peach was the first one because that's our most mature tree. Here is what our peach tree looks like right now. It is pretty dense. I may need to come in here and do some thinning, pruning on it. And then these strawberries underneath of it are filling out very nicely. So you can see I have some other plants I planted under here as companions. I've got some yarrow, some black-eyed Susan. I'm gonna put some creeping phlox back here this fall, but the strawberries are running around very nicely. They are, man, I think I started with like 3 or 4 strawberry plants. I just popped in the ground back here, and they are really doing their job filling out that space, aren't they? And then of course, just because we're talking strawberries, I will not miss a chance to show everyone my strawberry green stalk. It looks so good this year. This is the 7-tier leaf green stalk in lemon, and I got this one specifically for planting strawberries this year. So all of these started as bare root strawberry starts early in the year, so we haven't gotten a ton of berries from this one this year, but next year I expect this to be berry central. And really what I want to do is move my other 7-tier leaf model over here, put it right next to that one, and then fill it with all the same variety of strawberries. I have been slowly propagating these runners here in cups because I ran out of some of my cute strawberry cups. I did order some more with some cute little pins that should be coming in the mail soon because I really want to propagate enough of this variety. This is a Gurney's Whopper strawberry, which is a very large strawberry, and I have been slowly propagating them over here as the plants get mature. This is kind of like my little strawberry nursery. So while this isn't necessarily planting around fruit trees, I'm definitely propagating a lot of plants off of these that I am going to be moving around my fruit trees, and I'm just never gonna miss a chance to show you guys my strawberry green stalk because it is so pretty. It looks exactly how I wanted it to look when I started planting it this year. All right, so the last two crops I want to talk about for planting underneath of your trees are actually two things that I can't show you in my garden. One, because it's garlic. One of them is garlic, and I've already harvested all of my garlic for the season. So I'll just quickly talk about why I think garlic makes a great companion plant for planting around fruit trees. Garlic is really unique in that you plant it in the fall. So here in Maryland Zone 7, I plant my garlic in like November-ish time frame. And if you've never planted garlic before, you plant it in the fall. So you separate like the whole head and you take each individual clove and you plant it, and then you like 4 to 6 inches away, you plant another individual clove. Over the winter, they will do all their rooting, do all their stuff they need to do. And then very early in the season, you will notice tiny little green sprouts. Each of those individual cloves that you planted will become its own bulb of garlic. So they actually don't require that much space. Like the tall stalks of the garlic can take up a decent amount of space once they get pretty mature, but the bulb is what you really want to focus on, giving like 4 to 6 inches of space to grow really large. And you can kind of slot garlic down like anywhere in your garden. Last year I ran out of garlic, so I decided to plant more this year, and I planted a little bit closer together in my long row of garlic. But then I took all the rest of the cloves after I planted that and I popped them in all around the garden. So what makes garlic a really good plant to plant around fruit trees is that garlic is so early in the season that it's going to take advantage of that sun before too much foliage on your fruit tree has come in and shaded the area out around it. This timing works especially great if you have a dwarf or just a younger, smaller fruit tree, because you don't have to commit to garlic year after year. You could just grow it around your young trees, and then when they get too big that they start shading things out too early in the season, you can just stop planting garlic there. So the last one we are going to cover here in this list of 7 is a berry bush. It's the honeyberry. Now, I typically never cover anything that I have not personally grown myself in my garden, but this is an exception, and I'll tell you why. I just did not find it in the budget when I went a little crazy last fall ordering currants to also order honeyberries. And I also didn't have a great spot selected for them in my yard yet, because they're like a really cold climate berry. They do not love like our super hot and humid afternoons here in Maryland. So you need to be careful with where you're planting honeyberries so that, much like currants, they get enough sun, but they're shielded from that strong afternoon heat. So I am going to be ordering honeyberries this fall, and I'm really excited about that because we grow them in our Master Gardener demonstration garden. I handle most of our permaculture guilds, so we have some honeyberries planted in our fig guild and then in one of our cherry guilds. We actually moved a honeyberry because one of our honeyberries died last year. It was just getting too much sun, it was getting fried. So I decided to dig up another one of our honeyberries and move it on the other side of a fig shrub so that it only gets morning sun and it gets afternoon shade, and it is thriving. It is so healthy. Even during like our multiple days of 100 degrees when no one was there watering anything because we don't water those guilds, it has absolutely thrived and rebounded from looking a little bit crappy last year from getting too much sun. So I think this one is a really great companion for your guilds and for planting around your fruit trees. Just make sure that you look at how big the variety you're getting is and what the pruning requirements are so you know how far away to plant from your tree. And remember, they need a pollination partner. So this will be a good one to do like one honeyberry in one guild, and then a nearby guild put another honeyberry, and then after a couple years you will get some delicious unique berries that are pretty early in the season too. So before we wrap up here, I just want to make a couple important notes about some considerations you should make when you're deciding what to plant around your trees. And the first is that not all fruit trees are going to grow in the same way. So you may choose to prune some of your fruit trees with an open center. We are trying to train our peach tree to have an open center, which means a lot of sunlight is going to filter down through the middle and it's going to have really good airflow. However, our plum, we have not necessarily started training it with an open center. This one is more traditional of a tree look, so it may have a little bit more dense of foliage. So that's something I'm going to have to keep in mind when planting out this guild around the bottom of the plum tree. So not all trees are equal when it comes to light penetration and air circulation. Also keep in mind what the root needs are. So I mentioned blueberries earlier. Blueberries generally are not going to make a great companion plant for guilds because they do really thrive on acidic soil. I'm not saying you can't do it. I mean, if you just throw your blueberries to the ground and you mulch around everything and you just kind of let it ride, like they'll probably do fine if they get enough light, if you have them on a sunny edge. But I like to add a little bit of soil acidifier to my blueberries to help them get nice and healthy because they do thrive on that acidic soil, and you don't necessarily want to be adding that acidifier to some of your fruit trees. So the goal isn't to force things into areas just because you have space. The goal is to think about what's going to work well and complement that main center of that guild, which in this case right next to me is our peach tree. So we look at the peach tree, we look at how we're pruning it, we look at how big we're going to let it get, we look at the sun that can penetrate down through it, and then we look at the roots, and we figure out based on all of those things what we should plant around it. As an example here, we have a blueberry row, and I have a bunch of blueberries back here behind the peach tree. Now what I have decided to do, since the peach tree has gotten really large this year and we just put in these blueberry shrubs, is to actually move this blueberry shrub right here and to put one of the honeyberries I'm going to get right here. And that is because this area gets really nice shade, it gets dappled sunlight through the peach tree, but then midday it's going to get a little bit of direct sunlight, and then in the afternoon it will get a little bit more sunlight before the red bud and then the tree back here shaded out again. So I'm hoping that this ends up being a really great situation for our honeyberry, and then I'll just have to maybe next year figure out where I have enough shade to put a second one close enough by to be a pollination partner. So just to recap here, fruit trees do not have to be the only productive thing in your garden. If you have done some planting around your fruit trees, I would love to hear about it. I would love to hear what you are planting in addition to your edibles around the base of your fruit trees, because I have several more guilds that I'm going to be building out over the next few years. And if possible, I like taking things from elsewhere in the garden and not buying them and planning ahead so that I can start propagating things. So let me know what you're finding success with, especially under plum and cherry trees. So we did add a sweet cherry tree this year, and then we have that maturing plum tree, and I want to plan out those guilds maybe this fall, maybe next spring. We'll see what I end up getting to. So until my next video, happy planting.